Hello everyone, welcome to MES e-learning channel. In the last few sessions, we have been discussing about how to develop our skills for effective teaching, right? So we have been focusing on one thing, that is having interaction with the students or with the listeners. So for having interaction or for pupil participation, so to engage your learners in your learning, you need to, or even if you want to know their ideas, or their knowledge, so you need to ask questions for that. So a proper question is important if you want good response from your students. So in this session, we are going to learn skill of questioning. So what is the importance of this skill? So actually questioning, it is acting like a catalyst for engaging discussions, deeper understanding and critical thinking development among students. So unless a question is asked, when will they reflect on it? When will they think? Right? So to develop critical thinking or to make the students think about the concept that you're teaching, asking right questions are important. So the art of crafting inquiries that provoke thoughtful responses, encourage exploration, and guide learners towards discovering knowledge. So your question should be in a way where you're helping the students to discover the knowledge, where you're helping them to bridge the gap between their previous knowledge and their new knowledge. So now let's understand types of questions here, okay? So there are two types of questions. First is testing questions and then it is teaching questions. So from these words you understand, testing questions are asked when you want to test the knowledge of the students, and teaching questions are asked when you want to bridge the gap, when you want to take them to another concept to get their ideas. So there you ask them teaching questions. So now in testing questions, it can be introductory questions and recapitulatory questions. So introductory questions are asked in the beginning for what? Yes, for checking their previous knowledge. Right? So only when you ask questions, then you understand what is the base of the students, what is their level of understanding, what is the knowledge that they have about the content that you're going to teach them. So here that comes in your introductory part. So those questions will be called as introductory questions. Then recapitulatory questions, which is again testing questions that you will ask in the end after teaching your content. Why are you asking that? To understand if your students have understood the concept that you have taught them, right? So it is recapitulatory questions. So all the questions that you will ask towards the end will be recapitulatory questions, or even through, like when you're teaching, that time also you can ask, so to get an understanding whether they have understood or if they are with you through the learning. Then teaching questions. So in teaching questions, it is developmental questions and then direct questions. Direct question is when I'm directly asking them a question related to the content that I'm teaching. Like for example, if I'm teaching photosynthesis and if I'm directly asking them, what is photosynthesis? Or if I'm asking them, how do leaves prepare their own food? So it is all direct questions related to the content. So developmental question is when you are taking them to the content. So like some questions which will help them to bring, which will help you as a teacher to bring your students to the content that you are going to teach them. So you can ask them, what are the different parts of the plant? So when you are asking such questions, so probably the pupil will say leaves, roots, stems, and then you ask them, okay, so then what is the function of root? Then all these questions. So one after the other, when you ask such questions to take them to a concept, then it is developmental questions. Okay, so the questions that help you to relate to the content are developmental questions. So I suppose you understood these types of questions, right? So testing, teaching. In testing we have introductory, recapitulatory, and in teaching, developmental and direct. So always focus on asking good developmental questions. So what is the purpose of questioning? Why do we need to do this questioning? It is to expose the difficulties, so you understand where are the students facing difficulties, to search new ideas and viewpoints, because students have a lot of ideas in their mind. They are not coming as a blank sheet in your class. So to get their ideas, their views, to promote thinking, to make them think about the concept, to develop appreciation, and to improve their concentration so that they are focused in the class, to revise the work covered earlier, that is testing question, where you want to check their understanding of the previous topic that you have taught them, to lay emphasis on a concept. There also you can ask questions, and to prevent misbehavior again, so that your students are not distracted, so they know that you are going to ask them a question, they listen to you keenly, and they are there in track with you. And for deeper understanding and broader, understanding of the concepts. So these are the purpose of using questioning. Okay, now let me put a riddle in front of you. It's simple. I keep 6 honest serving men, and they taught me all I knew. So guess who they are. Okay, so you got the answer. Let's check if it's correct or no. Yes, so the answers are, they are the WH questions. That is what, why, when, how, where, who. All these are the questions. When we ask such questions, what happens when you ask what did you understand? What did you learn? Why did you learn? How did you learn? So asking such questions help me to understand or know everything in detail, right? So begin with WH words. These questions are very important. Avoid asking closed question where it is like, do you know this? So it is like where you get just an yes or no answer, right? Closed questions are when there is just yes or no answer. So we should avoid framing questions with which begin with helping verbs like am, is, are, was, where, has, have you understood, and all these questions, do or does, even related to the content. If you're framing questions using these helping verbs, then it is just closed questions. So we should avoid using that. Now, if you are teaching about a content and then you ask them, will he or like will the author feel about the incident that had happened? So all these questions will be just in yes or no, right? Yes, he will feel, or no, he won't. So we should avoid asking such questions. So we should be framing well-structured questions. How can you frame well-structured questions? The question should be short and straightforward. It should be not very long. So your question should be short and straightforward. Your question should be simple and specific. And your question should be clear. Okay. Now follow the question structure in English correctly. So there is a question word, that is what, when, why, who, how. And then your auxiliary or a helping verb, and then the subject, and then the main verb. Like an example which is given here, what does Rani eat? How did Raju travel to Kashmir? So how is the question word? Then you have a helping verb here. Your subject is there, Raju, and you also have a main verb, right? So these are the these things should be kept in mind when you frame your questions. Avoid the use of redundant words like, can you tell me the answer to, who can answer to my next question, which is directly ask the question. Now you don't need to put all these statements in between. Can someone who knows respond to my question, which is? So you directly put in the question. Start the question with the WH word. Also, avoid beginning with a statement and ending with a question word. So always begin with capital letter and end with a question mark, a simple rule that we have been following since childhood, right? Like now here you can see 2 examples. First is a statement with a question is called what. So what is happening here? This WH word is coming at the end, right? And another one, we are starting with the WH word. So which will be the correct? Yes. So second one is correct and the first one is incorrect. Same way for the next one. Yes, the first is incorrect. India achieved freedom when? So that is not the way you will frame your question. So always remember your WH word will come in the beginning. When did India achieve freedom? So these are some things that you have to keep in mind when you frame questions. Then you should have proper speed, pause and emphasis. So avoid beginning hasty, but at the same time avoid gaps also, maintain the proper flow. And have a little patience. Like, now suppose you asked a question, and then you're again asking a second question. Wait, let the students think, and then they will come up with their answers. And emphasize on the important words in the question so that it stays in the mind, and then it is easy for them to think accordingly. Like for example, here you can see different statements like, all the question is the same, where is your uncle? That is the question. But when I am actually stressing on, or when I am emphasizing on different words, the response changes. Like, where is your uncle? So here I am asking, where is he? The venue, the place. And if I'm stressing on is, where is your uncle? So he's not being seen around. So you're stressing on is, where is your uncle, right? Where is your uncle? So when I'm stressing on your, I actually want you to answer, I'm talking about your uncle. And then, where is your uncle? So here I'm going again stressing on uncle because I want you to reflect here that I want to meet your uncle, not your mom and dad. So this is how you can emphasize on the words to get proper response. Avoid suggestive question like, don't you think this was wrong? You bought that in London. You voted for Nirmit in the elections, right? So all these are suggestive questions. So you should avoid using suggestive questions. So we also saw avoid using redundant questions and avoid using suggestive questions. So what kind of questions have you, what kind of question should you frame? WH questions. Now, seeking appropriate information and relevancy. Here also it is important. So your question should seek proper response from if you want a right response from the students, your question should be set properly. Like, when do you celebrate Independence Day in your school? And then I'm asking them, who elects the president? How does the election of the president takes place? So there is a lack of link in between the questions, right? So you should have relevancy when you frame the questions. So it should be setting a proper pace of learning. Your question should be grammatically correct. So consciously check the verbs and tense that we use. So here you can see examples of incorrect questions and correct questions, right? So when did Olympic Games started? It's incorrect. So the right way will be, when did Olympic Games start? So these are a few examples that you can observe so that you frame your questions grammatically correct. Your question should be thought-provoking. It should make the students think. That is the reason we say just don't ask an yes or no question, because sometimes it becomes very, like some will say yes, some will say no, but you won't understand why did they say that. So you should always ask thought-provoking questions. So these are some examples of questions that you can put in which will help the students to think critically and answer. Sufficient questions should be asked. Now when you are teaching a content, just asking 1 or 2 questions and then just completing the content is also incorrect. So ask sufficient questions so that it helps you to know their understanding and then take them to the new knowledge correctly. And these are the reasons why you should ask sufficient number of questions. So what are the components of skills of questioning? So we have understood. First, it is well-structured questions. The question should be well-structured. You should have proper speed and pause. Grammatically, the question should be correct. Seeking appropriate information and asking sufficient number of questions. So if you have kept all these things in mind, then you have learned skill of questioning correctly. So I hope you understood what is skill of questioning. Now next, it is probing. So we'll understand what is probing in our next session. So thank you for listening. Stay tuned.